There's a pattern that has ended every great empire. Not conquest, not revolt, currency collapse. It unfolds the same way, every time. Military overextension, unsustainable spending, debasement and money printing, inflation, loss of confidence, then collapse. Rome, Spain, Britain, each believed the rules didn't apply to them. Each was wrong. And in 2025, the United States is tracing the same path. The only question is where we are on the timeline, beginning, middle, or end. This is how empires destroy themselves from the inside out. Begin with Rome. For 5 centuries, it ruled Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. 60 million people bound by roads, law, and a currency trusted from Britain to Egypt, the denarius. Introduced in 211 BC, it carried about 4.5 grams of pure silver. For generations, Rome protected that purity. A denarius was a promise you could hold, metal, not rhetoric. Trust funded expansion, paid soldiers, and built an empire of stone. But empires are expensive. Borders widened, garrisons multiplied, roads stretched farther, administration swelled. The bill outran the treasury, and then Rome did what every empire does when it spends more than it earns: it debased the money. Nero, AD 54 to 68, was first to cut deeply, reducing silver content from 100% to about 90%. 11 coins from the silver that once made 10. Same silver, more coins. That's inflation at the mint. The real damage came later. By Caracalla's time, AD 211, the denarius held roughly 50% silver, half value, half base metal. By AD 265 under Gallienus, it was down to about 5%. What began as money had become a veneer, a thin silver wash over worthless alloy. Now, imagine you're a Roman soldier in AD 265. Your pay arrives stamped with the emperor's face, the word denarius intact, but the buying power has collapsed. What cost 1 denarius around AD 200 might cost 50 by AD 300. Farmers refuse coin and demand barter. Soldiers demand gold or goods. Tax collectors can't collect taxes in a currency no one trusts. Trade ceases. Administration starves. The state's promises, roads, security, order, fade with the metal in its coin. And here is the brutal clarity. This wasn't defeat by foreign armies or plague. It was self-inflicted. Rome destroyed its currency to fund what it could not afford. When the money died, the machine it powered died with it. In AD 476, the Western Empire fell, not because its enemies grew strong, but because Rome could no longer pay to be Rome. The pattern stands: expansion, overspending, debasement, inflation, loss of function, collapse. 12 centuries later, the story repeats at a different scale. Spain in the 1500s enters its golden age. The New World opens. The Aztecs and Incas are conquered. Then, in 1545, the mountain of Cerro Rico at Potosi, history's richest silver deposit, is found. For a century, nearly half the world's silver pours from one mountain. Galleons cross the Atlantic with unthinkable wealth. The Spanish dollar becomes the first global currency, trusted, pure, and everywhere. And yet, exactly like Rome, the same paradox appears. More money doesn't make you richer if everyone has more money. Silver floods Europe. Prices rise. What cost 1 coin in 1500 costs 10 by 1600. The metal didn't get worse, it got abundant. Inflation is the price of plenty. Worse, Spain isn't building the engines of prosperity. It extracts, spends, imports. silver flows in from the Americas and flows out to France, England, and the Netherlands to buy what Spain doesn't produce: manufactures, ships, expertise. The crown drowns in debt. Philip II inherits vast obligations and fights on multiple fronts: Ottomans, Dutch rebels, England. When the numbers stop adding up, he defaults. 1557, then 1560, 1575, 1596. 4 sovereign bankruptcies in 40 years. Each default shatters trust. Lenders demand punishing rates. The mint debases. Copper coins are proclaimed equal to silver. No one believes it. Confidence evaporates. By the 1600s, decline is terminal. Armies unfunded. Colonies slip away. After the 30 Years' War ends in 1648, the empire's fracture is clear. By 1700, Spain, once master of the world's silver, has spent and borrowed itself into irrelevance. The pattern returns: windfall wealth, overspending, borrowing, inflation, default, loss of confidence, decline. Next comes Britain, the greatest of them all. Its rise, its currency, and its fall will complete the pattern and point directly to the present. Stay with me. In Part 2, we enter the British century, the gold-backed pound, world wars, the end of reserve status, and the blueprint for America's crossroads today. Then came total war. In 1914, Britain suspended gold convertibility to fund World War I. National debt exploded, from hundreds of millions to over $7 billion within 5 years. The presses ran, bonds piled up. When peace returned, the Treasury tried to rewind history. In 1925, Winston Churchill, then Chancellor of the Exchequer, restored the gold standard at the pre-war rate, an overvalued pound that strangled exports and demanded punishing interest to defend the peg. Unemployment soared. Growth stalled. By 1931, the strain snapped. Britain left gold for good, the pound devalued, and confidence cracked. World War II finished what the First had begun. Britain entered the fight already indebted and emerged with cities in ruins and a debt burden near 270% of GDP. At Bretton Woods in 1944, reality was formalized. The dollar replaced sterling as the world's primary reserve currency. The pound remained important, but no longer supreme. The post-war years were a slow unmasking. In 1947, convertibility backfired within 6 weeks. Capital controls returned. In 1949, a 30% devaluation. In 1956, Suez exposed the limits of British power. In 1967, another devaluation. By the 1970s, inflation blasted past 20%, and Britain went to the IMF for a bailout. The map turned from imperial red to independent nations, not because Britain was conquered, but because it could no longer afford an empire. The pattern, again: war debt, abandonment of sound money, persistent devaluations, inflation, loss of reserve status, imperial retreat. Now the lens shifts to us. The United States inherited the role Britain lost. In 1944, the dollar, backed by gold at $35 an ounce, became the world's anchor. Other currencies pegged to the dollar pegged to gold. Trust had a metal spine. But the costs of global leadership grew. Vietnam, the Great Society, bases around the world. Foreign creditors noticed the math. France, under de Gaulle, demanded gold for dollars, and the gold flowed out of Fort Knox. In 1971, President Nixon closed the gold window. No more redemption. The dollar became pure fiat, like Rome's late denarius and Britain's pound after 1931, backed by confidence alone. The petrodollar arrangement of the 1970s created powerful demand for dollars, but spending and deficits marched on. Debt climbed from under $1 trillion in 1980 to over $5 trillion by 2000, then to the tens of trillions after 2008 and 2020. The Federal Reserve's new alchemy, quantitative easing, created trillions in digital dollars to stabilize.
Meanwhile, reserve dominance frayed. Around 2000, more than 70% of global reserves were held in dollars. Today, that share is markedly lower and slipping. BRICS nations expand trade in local currencies. Central banks buy gold at a pace unseen in half a century. The world is hedging the dollar the way it once hedged the pound. Layer on the imperial bill, nearly 800 overseas facilities, a defense budget north of $800 billion, multi-trillion-dollar wars, and structural deficits during expansions as well as recessions. The checklist matches the old script with unnerving precision. Overextension, chronic deficits, monetary expansion, inflation pressure, and the first tremors of a confidence shift. History's warning is not abstract, it is a timeline. Empires do not fall in a day, they erode through their money. Britain showed how reserve status is lost, not by a single event, but by a sequence. Pegs suspended, devaluations admitted, inflation endured, prestige conceded. America stands at the hinge of that sequence now. The 7 stages are no longer theory, they're a scoreboard. The only debate is the inning. Don't blink. In Part 3, we map the full 7-stage pattern, Rome to Spain to Britain to the United States, so you can see exactly where we are and what tends to happen next. The pattern is ancient, precise, and merciless. 7 stages that have ended every great empire. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Stage 1, dominance. Every empire begins in strength. Rome's silver denarius, Spain's global silver dollar, Britain's gold-backed pound, and America's post-war dollar. Each was trusted, stable, and real. Sound money built confidence, and confidence built power. Stage 2, overextension. Power breeds ambition. Rome stretched across continents. Spain fought on multiple fronts. Britain ruled a quarter of the earth, and America maintains hundreds of military bases worldwide. Each empire promised more than it could sustain. Stage 3, deficit spending. As costs rise, budgets break, borrowing begins. Rome paid its legions with new coinage. Spain financed wars with silver. Britain issued endless bonds. And America runs trillion-dollar deficits even in peacetime. It always starts.
Stage 6, loss of confidence. Once citizens and nations stop believing in the currency, the unraveling begins. Rome's soldiers demanded gold. Spain's creditors refused to lend. The world moved from the pound to the dollar. Today, nations diversify, trade in local currencies, and stockpile gold. The shift has already begun. Stage 7, collapse. It's the moment the math can no longer be ignored. The empire can't pay its bills, can't sustain its reach, can't defend its illusion. Rome fragmented, Spain faded, Britain surrendered global leadership. And now America faces the same crossroad. Debt surging, confidence weakening, inflation quietly taxes the middle class while enriching the asset-rich few. The world no longer trusts Washington's fiscal discipline. Allies diversify, adversaries prepare alternatives. The empire hasn't fallen, but the foundations are cracking. And yet, unlike Rome or Spain, America's currency isn't regional. The dollar is the global system. If it collapses, the shock won't stop at national borders. Every market, every central bank, every trade route is tied to it. When Rome fell, Europe suffered. When the dollar falls, the world will.
But the pattern doesn't promise doom. It promises consequence. The laws of economics are as absolute as gravity. You cannot print prosperity. You cannot borrow forever. And you cannot debase value without paying the price. America, like every empire before it, believes it's different. It isn't. The math has never lied. Rome debased silver to pay its legions. Spain drowned in its own silver flood. Britain borrowed itself into decline. America prints trillions while insisting it can't happen here. But history disagrees. The pattern doesn't care about patriotism, technology, or military might. It only cares about balance, and balance always returns. The collapse may not come with fire or invasion. It may come quietly, in shrinking savings, in soaring prices, in fading trust. The empire won't fall in a single night. It will erode, piece by piece, until one day people wake up and realize the old world is gone. That's how every empire ends, not with a battle, but with a bill. If this story made you see the present through the eyes of history, remember this: patterns never lie, they only repeat. The question isn't if the cycle ends, it's how long before it does. Subscribe for the next chapter, because when the pattern completes, understanding it